We begin this chapter by looking at solving equations, and we're going to use the addition property of equality to solve equations in one variable. So solving an equation simply means the process of finding a number that makes the equation a true statement. When we find our answer, these are solutions or roots, and they make the equation equal. The number one equation of linear with one variable is in the form of what's called ax plus b equals c. That means you have your variable of x and everything else is a number. So as long as we only have one exponent and one variable, we have a linear equation in one variable. Now when we have equations such as these right here, x minus 3 equals 8 and x equals 11, these are equivalent. And so when we can add on both sides of our equation, we have our property of equality, which simply states if A equals B, that means if I'm going to add something to A, it will also be the same thing if I add it to B. So in this part, we're going to actually solve using the property. That means if I want to solve this equation, I want to basically get the x by itself, I'm going to add 3 to both sides of the equation. Add 3 because adding 3 gives me 0 and x is what's left over, and when I add 3 I get an 11. So the answer to this, or satisfies the equation, is when x equals 11. So if we look at a fractional problem, we have a negative 1/2 equals x minus 2/3. I have to add 2/3 to both sides because that's what's on the side of the variable. So if I add 2/3, we go back to our last chapter, how do I add fractions? Well, to add fractions, I need to have a common denominator. So this becomes 3, and that's a negative, and this becomes a 4, and when I add, I get 1/6 equals x. So we're using our rules from last chapter to solve equations, but we're adding to create that answer. So we're going to solve this whole equation, but the first thing we want to be able to do is anything that can be put together before we start solving, we want to put together. So we have the 5y and the negative 4y, which gives me 1y, and we have a 3 and we have a negative 8, which gives me a negative 5, equals 6 plus 9 is 15. Now I have an equation I can solve. So I can go through the process of adding 5 to both sides, and then I get y, or 1y, equals 20. And 1y is the same thing as y, because ones in front are normally not written. So there's our answer, solution to the problem. So if we look at this next problem right here, I want to combine what's alike. And so the 8y and the negative 7y gives me 1y. And then I have 7 and negative 10, which is negative 3, and 6 plus 4, which is 10. And now I can solve the equation. So you don't solve the equation until you have everything combined. So 1y equals 13, and then that really is just y equals 13. So we've solved the equation. When you have an equation where everything has been combined, but you have letters on both sides of the equation, we have to isolate the variable by getting the variable on one side. I always bring this variable over to this side. So to do that, I'm going to have to bring the 2y over, but I have to change its sign. So you basically are taking one variable on one side of the equal sign and moving it to the other side by changing its sign. And now this can become, now we have like terms, this becomes 1y minus 9 equals 6. And now I can add my 9 to my equation, and I get 1y, which is the same thing as y. And so my answer is y equals 15. So over here we have the 3x and the 2x. So I'm going to bring the 2x over, and when I do that, I change its sign, and now I can combine like terms right here. Give me 1x minus 6 equals 5. I can then add my 6 to get rid of the negative 6, and 1x is the same thing as a regular x, so the answer is 11.